Good morning, everyone. I'm talking about the environment fader. So what is the, or how do we build the environment of a LARP, and what kind of design choices are included there on a general level? So when I say environment, what do I mean? Environment is basically everything in our surroundings that we can sense. So anything and everything that is physical in the presence of the players. So this can be the room and how the room looks, but also other senses are important here. How does it feel? How does it smell? What is the temperature there? So everything that is that you put in the space where the players will be playing is part of the environment. How it looks, props, location, scenography. And we can design all of these parts. All of these are designable surfaces. We can design the smell, the taste, the feel, the soundscape. But then there are some things that, especially if we are LARPing outside, that are beyond our control, like lighting, weather, temperature. But these still need to be taken into consideration. These are part of the experience that we are creating. Why does the environment matter? The environment, sort of, in order to get to that question, we may think first, sort of, where does role-playing take place? When you are role-playing, where is the role-playing? One way to look at this is that role-playing is an internal process, that is a subjective process. It is something that happens to the player, that the role-playing happens inside the head when you are pretending to be somebody else. So if role-playing is seen as an internal process, something that just happens to the player, then the environment isn't perhaps that important. But we have another word for that, and that's daydreaming, when it's just you thinking about stuff in your own head. Then if we think about role-playing as something that happens between two people, both of them are pretending to be somebody else, then again, perhaps the environment is not that important, but the meat of the key elements of that action, that role-playing, happen between those two people. But if we think about role-playing as something that happens in a physical environment, that it is between people in a situation, in some kind of a location, then the environment becomes much more important. So when thinking about the environment, we also can think about where is the focus in our LARP. Is it in social interaction between people, or is there an element relating to the physicality of the location? And then we can think about sort of what kind of actions does the environment encourage. If we have a black room where there is nothing there, then there is nothing there that will give us any kind of cues, any kind of instructions as to what we could do in that environment. However, if we are in a black room that has a huge ball, and there's only that ball, then obviously that is going to be some kind of an element in the interaction in the LARPs that we are creating. So we can also use the environment to bring focus to the things that we are to engage with in that environment. So when we are thinking about the environment, there are two things sort of that we think about. How does it look, and what we can do with it? So both of these are important. So what do we see, and what can we do with the things that we see? All right, let's go into the fader. On the fader, we have, at the maximum end, we have 360-degree illusion, which is the idea that in the environment, everything looks and works exactly as it should. So this is something we've already covered yesterday. So for example, if we were to LARP in this room, then obviously we would probably use this as a lecture hall, because that is what this is. At the other end, we have material independence, which means that it doesn't matter at all what is the surroundings. Like Family Anderson could be played anywhere. The important thing is not the environment, but the interaction between the siblings. And then in the middle of the fader, we have clarity, where we have stripped down the environment so that we have taken those things away that are not necessary, but we have only added very few things that are important. So on this slider, we have both the presence and absence of diegetic and non-diegetic material. Diegetic means things that are real within the fiction. So for example, if we were in Family Anderson, the things that are real within that fiction is probably the table and the chairs we are sitting around are real, and everything else is perhaps irrelevant. If we want to look at the painting, you point to the air and say that here is the painting of the children, for example. So that would mean that the table is something that is real within the fiction, and once somebody points out the painting also becomes real. So on this fader, we can remove noise, meaning we can remove noise that is sort of sound. So for example, if you're playing in a crowded cafeteria, it might be difficult to concentrate on the playing. So you go into a black box where you can control the sound. But we also remove visual noise. We remove those things that can distract the player in that environment. So similarly, again, in a black box, we've removed everything that is not relevant to the experience. And then we can add fictional elements. Once we have stripped down everything, if we go into a black box, we can start adding things that are important. For example, you bring in a coffee cup and a mug and a pitcher of water, and obviously those things will then have focus. So going from material independence, where basically we can play something anywhere, when we go up the slider, we are removing things that are not important, and then we are adding things that are important. So we have sort of two sliders here in one, both removing stuff that is irrelevant and adding stuff or keeping stuff that is relevant. And the important thing here is that, of course, we use imagination when doing this. Especially sort of when we are not in a 360-degree illusion, we need to imagine things. We either need to imagine things that are not there to be there. We're imagining that there's a painting here, or we might be imagining in a fantasy LARP that the airplanes that go over the campsite, that they're actually dragons flying. That requires imagination, but also sort of we are using imagination when we're removing things. So for example, in Family Anderson, if we played outside, if we were to play that in a crowded cafe, we would then remove all the other people with our imagination. A key concept here is the concept of affordance. Affordance is a word that means sort of what do we think we can do with an object. So the affordance of a chair, for example, a chair affords that you sit on that chair, or maybe you throw that chair, or maybe you can climb on the chair and reach up. So these are the things that when we look at the chair, what do we think that we can do with that chair? And affordance is interesting because it is a relationship between you and the object. So it is not in the object because it depends on who is using the chair. If we use the chair, we have these things that we can do with it. If it's a 5-year-old or a 2-year-old, then there are different things that the chair would afford. And of course, different players have different kinds of bodies, so different things afford different things. But whenever we put something in the environment, or whenever there is something in the LARP environment, it affords different things for us. For example, if we put in a screwdriver, we can use this screwdriver to, open or close screws, or we can use it as an ice pick, or maybe we could kill someone with the screwdriver. This being a LARP, of course. But maybe if we have a very young player, then they maybe wouldn't have the strength to use it in the correct way, or they don't know how to use it to open screws. Of course, the thing that I have here is not actually a screwdriver. This is a picture of a screwdriver that is put on the wall. So what is the affordance of this? Maybe we can do shadow theater here. That's the actual affordance of what I have here. And this is important in LARP because LARP is not theater. If we are doing a theater play and I have a picture of a library on the stage, then everybody in the audience realizes, the characters are sitting in a library. If in a LARP we have a picture of the library, it can still sort of act as a symbol that this action happens in a library, but I can't actually walk up to the bookshelf and take books. That is not something that is afforded by that design. So when designing the environment, certain things can can be used more as sort of a symbols of something, that they tell you where you are, but you can't use them. Or then you can go for an environment where all the things that are there are actually usable, that they have the affordance, that you can read the book, you can hit someone with the book, you can sort of build a domino stack from the books or whatever you would want to do. And the things we have in the environment, they bring focus. So a designed LARP environment is often uneven. So there are certain elements that the game masters have clearly brought into the LARP, and those are usually the elements that are more important than others. For example, yesterday in New Voices in Art, the artworks were very important, whereas the space and, for example, the color of the walls was not as important. So we sort of know by what is added and what is concentrated on, that these are the things we're supposed to be focusing on. And these are things that we can do with the environment. We can use the environment and the props to bring focus. Looking at the fader, at the maximum end we have the 360-degree illusion. It has a number of nice qualities. It gives us a visually coherent world that is easy to understand, because anything and everything works exactly as it should work. Everything is functional, usable, and most importantly, playable. We can use those things in our play. Translating and interpretation is not much of a problem. We know that this is a book, this is not a prop of a book, or this doesn't stand in for something else. If there is a foam sword, we know that it is a foam sword and not supposed to be an actual sword, because this is a 360-degree illusion. Everything is exactly as it should be. Of course, the 360-degree illusion is an ideal. It feels real, and most importantly, it looks awesome in photos. And this is something sort of as a designer that this also does matter, because this is how the ideas of your LARP will travel. It also encourages nonverbal activity. For example, if in a 360-degree illusion I'm doing the dishes and I'm actually washing dishes, I can wash the dishes in a very angry fashion, or I can wash the dishes and sort of have fun with it, because all of those things are real, and I can have a more nuanced way of interacting with it. And when you have a 360-degree illusion, it makes you feel more important, and it impresses your players, because it's sort of often that is seen as a goal. It is an ideal. However, it is less imaginative, less co-creative, and it enforces real-world behavior. The players can't just say that, okay, this painting here, if there is no painting there. They can't just add stuff into the fiction on the go. And it doesn't require as much imagination. And since there is the environment that you can only follow, then it enforces real-world behavior. You will work as you would. Also, bringing in magic, for example, would be difficult. Also, it's difficult to play test, because when you are creating a 360-degree game, usually you can only set it up once. So play testing in that environment will be difficult. So you'll play test it just before it starts, or the LARP is the playtest. It's expensive and labor intensive, creating an environment that is exactly as it should be. And most importantly, if everything in the environment is perfect, everything works and looks exactly as it should, then the one thing that sticks out is maybe the player. The player may feel that I'm not. I mean, everything else is real, but I'm not real. I'm just pretending. So sort of in a weird way, that might be a hindrance to at least some of the players. Halfway on the fader we have clarity, and this is sort of where, or this is again an ideal. Now we have taken away all the noise, and we've added only very few things. So absence of noise, very few fictional elements. We have sharp focus on whatever it is that we want to be concentrating on. Relevant elements are highlighted. This is sort of the black box ideal. Very designed, very controlled. If you start with an empty room, the differences are easy to add. So you have very good control over the environment. However, it can be just as difficult to set up as a 360-degree illusion. What do I actually need there? Because all of those things that I put will guide the play will have a tremendous impact on play. It requires much more play testing and can end up just as messy if you're not careful about the things you introduce. At the other end, at the minimum end, we have material independence, so it doesn't matter where the LARP takes place. Environment does not really matter, great for short scenarios. So if you want to create a LARP scenario that runs for an hour to 4 hours, creating it in a way that it can be played anywhere, it will travel around the world, and it's easy to set up at festivals, or anybody can set it up by themselves because they don't need to worry about the environment. Much less physical labor, easier to stage. But it does require collective focus. The players need to check in with each other so that they have a unified enough understanding of what the environment actually is, since it's not visible. It encourages verbal and social interaction because that is the thing that is most real, the other players and the interaction. And the focus is then on the social. It requires more work for participants to focus. And it's harder to sustain with large player groups. If you have 100 players in a room that has nothing to guide them as to sort of where they are, different parts of the LARP might start drifting in different directions. Difficult to do nuanced nonverbal information. If I'm pretending just to do the dishes and there are no dishes for me to do, then just communicating that I'm actually doing the dishes might be the thing that I can't communicate it how I'm doing the dishes. And it's not as impressive, it's not as real. Finally, I leave you a few design questions. What are the minimum requirements for the environment in the LARP that you are designing? So what do you need at the very least? What changes would bring focus and make the interactions more interesting? So how to bring about focus? What kind of a style of an environment would fit my vision best? And perhaps most importantly, what can I and my players afford, both in money and time, in the environment? Thank you.